All right, yo, Just the Thought podcast. We are back. Shout out to Andre. Andre could not be here today. Andre, we're hoping you have a great weekend. We have a special guest today. Alumni, University of Maine, Farmington alum, Luke. I call him Luke D1. Yes, has always been a down to earth dude. Has incredible knowledge when it comes to economics, when it comes to life in general, man. And I'm glad that we were able to keep in touch. I'm glad that I reached out to you and you were able to respond. And I think this is important, man, because our country is kind of in a downhill slope like it has been this last, I don't know, forever. And it's good to talk about, and I'm excited to have you on. But before we get into the show, introduce yourself, brother, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, hi, my name's Luke Dwornik Longacre. Get you, like Ray said, I went to UMF. I finished with a degree in political science. Currently, I live in Krakow, Poland, working in finance and doing stand-up. So, yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, yo, how so before we get how's life in Poland, man? Like obviously it's a lot different from the States, where it's work, work, work. I know living out in Spain, it's more like you work, but then again, you value vacations, you value family time. In the States is a lot different. How is it in Poland?
Well, yeah, actually, I started in the company I work for now. It is crazy to me. I have healthcare completely paid for by the company, which I know lots of people in the States have that as well. But yeah, lots of paid time off, lots of emergency holidays, decent amount of sick leave. Yeah, it is quite different. The biggest thing for me that's different is being in a city, because obviously when I was in Farmington, it's not a very big town, so it's crazy to me. Like, this isn't even really. I think I could get this wrong, but I think it's like 700 to 800,000 people live in Krakow.
Oh, it's big.
But
It's
to
big.
me, that's like massive. To me, that's like absolutely giant. So
Yeah.
that's the biggest change, I think, is just being in a city versus being in a more rural area. Honestly, the biggest
Yeah.
adjustment.
What are some of the things that was hard for you to adjust to? I know for me it was I don't know how it is in Poland, but for me living in Spain, it was more like the resting hours. So the resting hours are from like 2 to 4 in the afternoon, where people are either taking a nap or they're spending time with their family. In the States, that does not exist,
Yeah.
and you know that.
Siesta,
Yeah,
right?
siesta.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, it's still hard for me to adjust to, even though I've been out here for almost 3 years. It's been hard because I'm so used to work, work, work. I remember the first year I got out here, and I'm like, dude, the clothing stores the are closed. The local drugstores are closed. If you want to get tobacco or anything like that, the pharmacy is closed. I'm like, what is going on? Because I wasn't aware. I didn't know what siesta was until I got here. Nobody informed me on what it would be like. Nobody told me how it would go. So I'm here like in the middle of Barcelona, and I'm like, yo, why is everything closed? And like a lady pulled me aside and she was like, come here. I was like, what? He was like, all right, during these hours, yeah, like it's called like a siesta, like people take a break. I'm like, people take a break for how long? Like what, 30 minutes? No, like 2 hours.
2 hours,
Two
right? Yeah,
hours. What?
2 hours, man.
Yeah, so like my first year I'm bugging because I'm thinking like, yo, if this is the case, I have to like find out a time where I can go. And I've been doing it ever since. Like I know what time. Okay, if I go at like 4:52 to the store, I know at 5 it's gonna be open. So I've
Yeah,
managed to like I manage my timetable and like what's when to do things. In the States, it's kind of like they're working all the time. But
yeah.
what was the hardest thing for you to get accustomed to?
I think, I guess, like strangely, the culture here is just a bit different. To say the least. You also know me as well. Like I'm very friendly. I'm very outgoing.
Yeah,
In Poland, a lot of people are just it is a stereotype. It's not everyone for sure, but a lot of people are just more introverted. Keep to themselves a little bit, keep to themselves and their family and their really, really close friends. People tell me that like in the States, you'll refer to someone as a friend that you don't know particularly well, but you get along with.
yeah.
Whereas here they have two different words. They have shiacho, which is a friend, like a friend you hang out with all the time, and then like a colleague, which is like a colleague. That's the word that they use for it. I think that sums it up pretty well. Um, so yeah, it's a little bit harder to get through to people. Strangers do not like being spoken to at all, as like a lot of people throughout the world.
Yeah.
I literally just said I made eye contact with a bigger gentleman walking by me on my way back from the gym. I just said "Dzień dobry," which means hi, means good day, and he said "Przydalaj," which more or less means go fuck yourself as a response. And I was like, what? Like, I was so baffled. Like, so I've had to get used to that a little bit. But other than that, because of like the nightlife, there's so much going on here. It really suits me. I think I've adjusted quite well, honestly. But one of the things you're saying about a siesta, my ex and like still a very, very close friend of mine, I told you about, who lives in Bartacaldo and Bilbao.
Yeah.
Here she would take naps. So on the weekend, she would always do that, like 2 to 4 or like 4 to 6. She's like, "We're taking a nap now, so we can go party tonight," essentially. And we did that every time. It was like strange for me to get used to,
Yeah,
actually. But
man. Yeah, I mean it's refreshing, don't get me wrong. I got used to taking naps. Um, but it's the whole adjustment. Like when you're in a new environment, it's hard to make that adjustment because you don't want to be all right, man, it's good to be vulnerable, but you don't want to be vulnerable all the time. And I feel like when you're into it, when you're in a new environment, you have to be vulnerable. And that's one thing I had to learn was like I have to accept that I don't have any power here. Like I have to accept that everything is new for me. I have to actually reach out to ask for help, what to do, what are the things to do in my city, things like that. And it's and you can relate to it, man. It's difficult to be vulnerable. But when you do adjust, you have this trust for yourself, and you know that okay, like I'm able to adjust here, I can adjust anywhere. Like that's the kind of feeling I have now. Like being out here living in a different country, I'm at this point where I'm like I can live anywhere if I really wanted to. But before it wasn't like that, bro. But it's all about vulnerability. When you open yourself up and you're able to be okay with asking for help, it becomes a different situation for yourself, and that's
yeah,
why I'm learning.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Like that's a good word for it, I think. Um, you have to understand that, like exactly like you said, you have to understand that you kind of have to adjust. You have to reach out. You've branched out, and yeah, asking for help. It's like I'd be screwed if I didn't have as much help as I had, like getting here and
Right.
helping with the move and all, just like the even just the like the legal, like the documents and the bureaucracy. Help getting so much help from my Polish friends with translating, especially when I didn't speak any Polish, like at all. Um, yeah, you learn. Yeah, I think you're completely right. I sympathize with that.
Are you fluent in Polish? Are you fluent? Like
No,
no.
no, I can like I probably like. Do you know you do you know like the A1 B, like A1 A2 B1?
B1,
So
B2, C1, C2. Yeah.
yeah, for people who don't know, that's like for teachers of language, because I started here as an English teacher.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
like you have like nothing, and then A1 is like you speak, like you say hi and how are you.
Mm-hmm.
A2 is like you speak a little bit more and you can form sentences. B1 is where you can kind of start talking to people and having conversations. I'm probably there in terms of like communicating, but in terms of like the grammar and stuff like that, I'm probably at A2. I can
Oh,
talk to
okay.
people. Like I don't have a massive issue with communication here. Like I understand a lot of things, especially if I know what's being spoken about. But Yeah, I would not. I'm not close to fluent. People laugh at my accent all the time. I have a very thick American accent when I speak Polish, so
Oh, yo,
because I don't
you're
lead
not
into
alone.
it. I don't like try too hard because if I try too hard, people say I sound Russian, and that's not a very good thing to sound like at the moment. So yeah.
You're not alone, man. Like people make fun of me all the time. I am speaking Spanish, maybe I don't know. I'm not gonna lie and say 100% of the time. Maybe like 80% of the time,
Oh wow.
75%. Yeah, because you kind of have to in this city. People know how to speak English here. The thing is, they don't want to.
Okay.
I have manipulated a couple people to speak English because I can tell, like as a teacher, you know who speaks English. You know who
Yeah.
does. So like if I remember my first couple years here, like my first 2 years here, uh they were like when I was at the bar, I was like, oh, let me get like a Coke and rum or something like that. Or let me get like a glass of wine. And the lady was looking at me. She was like,
Okay.
no entiendo nada, no entiendo nada. And I was like, ¿Estás seguro? Are you sure? Like, she's
You
like,
don't
no,
have
I don't. And then
anything?
she started speaking in English. She's like, no, I don't understand. I was like, oh, you do speak English because I can tell, that look like it's a hesitant look. I was like, oh, so you do speak English? And she's like, yeah. I was like, okay, I want a fucking Coke and rum. Like, but I have manipulated a few people to speak English, even though they don't want to. But no, this city they make fun of me all the time when I am trying my best, and especially with a couple drinks in me. When you're drunk, you have the confidence. When I have the confidence and I speak Spanish, they're like, "Yo, what the fuck are you saying?" And it's like, I'm right. I'm correct, right? They're like, yeah, but your pronunciation is not the best. And the whole time in my head, I'm like, but I'm confident right now. Like, don't put that on me. You know what I'm saying?
It's
But
no offense. It's like I have lots of Spanish friends here. I love Spanish people, but come on, as if Spanish people don't struggle with speaking English like a
but
bit. Like it's a stereotype in Poland, man. Like it's not that they can't. Like here, most of my friends do, but it's just their accents like really thick. Like Alma, my friend couldn't understand British people as an example. She couldn't understand them at all. She could understand Americans fine, and the Polish people speaking English, but she couldn't understand the British. And when she spoke, sometimes it was really hard to understand her. But yeah, yeah, it's that's interesting to me that Spanish people are giving you crap for
yeah, they always do.
for the accent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they're also not. I don't know about in Poland, but they're also not used to the American English. They're used to the British English.
Mhm.
There's so the way we talk, we shorten our words. We're very lazy with our English. We speak a lot slower than British people. We also talk like we're not important. British people do that. Sorry to my British friends. It's true. You guys talk like you're important. It is true. They talk like they're important. We don't give a fuck. We just talk. And a lot of the Spanish people, they don't understand that. Like, oh, why you talk? Because like for an example, one time when like a baseball hat, for an example, oh, what do you call this? It's a hat. Yeah, but isn't there like a special word? I was like, yeah, but we don't say that. We just say a hat,
Hat.
man. Like,
Yeah.
what I'm saying? We kind of try to keep it basic for people. Like, so it's hard for them to understand some of my English and the British English. They understand more. I don't know about in Poland, but in Spain they're taught the British English.
Mhm.
Is it
In
the same?
Poland, normally they're taught British English as well. They use like Cambridge and Oxford like teaching
Trinity?
plan stuff
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
All right. So, yo, let's before we get into it, man, I want to talk a little bit about your stand up. What made you want to start stand up, and what did this always occur in your mind? Like, oh, I want to do it, or what gave you the motivation to do stand up?
well,
She is 95 years old. I'm like, Mama, you're 95. She's like, Luke, stop. Well, you're gonna be 96 next year. She's like, shut up, Luke. I'm like, you're almost 100. She's like, you were fucking adopted. Did you know that? Have your parents informed you?
I've always loved watching stand up since I was like 11 or 12. I saw my first like stand up special on Comedy Central, like again, like 11 or 12 years old. I've always really liked the art form. Think it's really, really important kind of art, not to sound like too, what's it called? Self-important, if you will, but like I think it's a really, really important art form because it's like people just expressing themselves in plainly sometimes.
Right.
Uh, but basically, I play music, and so I'm used to being on stage. I'm not like I've always been interested in the arts, but then here I came partially because of my friend Tom Milner, who's a stand-up comic here, and he just introduced me to everyone, and I started going to the shows. Everyone was really friendly, and that's my big community here. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to be coming to these shows all the time. I really like stand-up. So I tried it for the first time at Tom's show. Tom had a show a bit like a couple years ago, and I just loved it instantly. It's scary. It's scary. It's fun. It's nerve-wracking. It's awesome. Like uh, and the people that are involved too. Their comics are just an interesting bunch most of the time. Like I don't think I'm an immensely normal person, but I'm probably relatively normal in comparison to lots of my friends who do stand up. They have really outgoing and interesting personalities with a lot to offer outside of stand up on top of that. So that's partially why I like it. It's just the people I've met doing it. I would go if I wasn't performing. I go constantly when I'm not performing because these are my people. Like these are good friends of mine. Um, and I can't describe how much I've improved. Like I've been doing it for 3 years now, and I do lots of different kinds of material. I try to do really absurdist and silly stuff, then just stories, just things like learning Polish, typical experiences people have here, um, and making fun of Americans a bit, obviously, which is easier for us to easier to do with American. I actually
I
last
hate
night
that. I hate that. I don't mean to cut you off. I hate that we are the topic in other countries. I hate that
yeah.
because you get the typical oh, so I mean you guys all eat like garbage, right? I'm like, yo, I'm not fat. Look at me. Like, not everybody
No,
goes to
you're
McDonald's.
definitely not.
You know what I'm saying? And you're not like, you know what I'm saying? Like we don't go to McDonald's all the time. We don't fucking have bacon pancakes and like grits all the time. Like, don't watch these movies. But it is funny as hell when you hear the stereotypes.
Yeah. Actually last night, Finnish comedian named Lauri, um, Lauri asked the audience, do who here like clap if you speak more than one language fluently? And I'm sitting there because I don't speak more than one language fluently. I speak
You're being
a
honest,
fair
yeah.
amount, but I can't really justify saying that. And then he's like, so clap if you are monolingual. And I clapped. I was one of the only people in the audience that clapped. And he's like, I really should have just asked if there are any Americans in the audience. And I just died. I died laughing. I'm like, and then I asked the audience because I had a bit on gun violence in the U.S. that I did last night, and I asked the audience, "What is the United States known for? What are the stereotypes?" And Laudy immediately says, "Idiots." As loudly, I'm like, fair enough, man. Just shut the
Okay,
fuck up for the rest
it's
of
not true, but it is true. Yeah, yeah.
it.
I get it. Um,
um,
what is some
mhm,
because nowadays we unfortunately I have to say it, we come from a very our generation is very sensitive. We are very sensitive.
mhm.
I am happy
Yeah,
that
yeah.
we have came to a we have came to an agreement that mental health is a problem.
Yeah.
But when it comes to comedy, back then you've seen people like Patrice O'Neill,
Mhm,
people like Bill Murr, uh, Andrew Schultz, Tim Dillon, these type of guys that say what they want. They don't care
mhm.
about the backlash. How do you feel when you go on stage? Do you feel like there's certain things you have to stay away from, or you just give them your all? You just tell it
No,
as it
I
is.
actually sorry, yeah, sorry to cut you off. I really genuinely feel like I don't need to talk about certain things. Like I do stay away from stuff. Actually, last night is the first time I ever talked about anything to do with politics at all on stage. I don't really the things that I do that are would be like offensive to people are so obscenely ridiculous that they're not really offensive at that point. As an example, like pointing to something and going, "Hey, do you see that?" The audience member goes, "Yeah," and I go, "Well, Ray Charles couldn't." Just like
Ooh.
something, yeah, I know. It, but it's so silly that it's not. It's hard to get offended. And also, Ray Charles has been dead for ages, but like it's not meant to. It's not really meant to be offensive to blind people either. Of course, it's just it's a stupid thing to say that gets me from one joke to the other.
Yeah.
I actually, and I do the one thing I've gotten some backlash on is I do a bit where, um, gosh, I lost my train of thought. I'm talking about my friend Anna when I visited the States. She asked me when she's like, "How is Poland? How do you enjoy living in Poland?" I'm like, "Love living in Poland. It's fantastic." Then Anna asked me, "Oh, cool. So are you learning German?" I'm like, "German, Anna?" She's like, "Oh shit, they don't speak German in Poland, do they?" I'm
Oh
like,
my God.
"Well,
She
they
was
used to."
serious. She was serious.
No, she was serious. She was completely serious.
Was there
I'm
any
like, "Well,
alcohol involved?
no, no. She's just yeah, like but then I say, oh well, they used to, but they don't really like to talk about that because obviously Poland was invaded.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing that I've gotten any kind of backlash on. But it's kind of I understand it's like I go up and I say things. If people don't enjoy them or don't laugh, they don't enjoy them or they don't laugh. If someone is upset by something I say, like I have the right to say what I want to say. I do believe that completely. But they also have a right to say what they think of what I said. I think that it kind of needs to go both ways a little bit more than lots of comics make it out. They kind of say they don't like any kind of criticism when they say anything. And I might even disagree with the criticism, but in my mind, I'm like, if you're going to go on stage and you have this giant platform, especially if you're a famous comedian, um, taking what people taking what people say, you don't have to agree with all of them, but complaining about people complaining about you is kind of ironic to me because they're using their free speech, they're using their like will to express their opinion, and
Right.
then they're saying, "Oh, I don't want them to be able to express the way they feel about it." Again, they could be completely wrong, but they do have the right to say it. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, no, it makes
I'm in the
sense.
minority. I'm in the minority amongst my friends with that. No one like most of my friends who are comics completely disagree with that, which is
Right.
fine. Like they're allowed to, yeah, they're allowed to think what they think, and ultimately, it's just comedy. So,
Yeah. What was before we move on, let me ask you this last
mm-hmm.
question. What no, it's a two-part question. The first part, what was that moment when you got on stage, you're like, yo, this is for me. And what is the best feeling about comedy to you?
Um, I think like the moment for me may have been again maybe this third or fourth time I performed. The first time I performed for Krakow Stand Up Comedy, which is the main organization that sets up the English stand up here. The first time I did that and it went well, that's when I was like all in completely. Like it didn't take very long for me. It's addictive. It's a very addictive art form. And yeah, and the reason it's addictive for the second part of the question is just getting getting laughs. I know it sounds super cliche. It sounds like insanely obvious, but I enjoy. But it's not just laughs. I enjoy making the crowd uncomfortable sometimes.
Yeah.
Not in a bad way, in a funny way. Hopefully, like uh I enjoy that's the best feeling is if I feel like I've left the stage making someone's day slightly better, even just a little bit better than it was, even if they were having a good day before. if I can like add to that, I think that that's a big reason I want to do it. I actually always say before I get off the stage, I say something that Bo Burnham said at the end of one of his specials, which is, "I hope you're happy." You might not be. Like you coming to a stand-up show, you might not be in the best of moods. You might be having a terrible week. You might be going through a divorce. You might be going through whatever. But if you can laugh at my stupid jokes for 5 minutes and it makes your day slightly better, then that's like why I enjoy doing it so much, honestly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. I actually read a book. So I use this app almost all the time. It's called Blinkist. Blinkist is an app where you can read a book in 15 minutes and pretty much summarize the book in 15 minutes. They give
Mhm.
you, if you know, if you want to be a cheapskate like me and not pay for the monthly fee, they give free books every day. So there's always a different topic every day.
Okay.
And it's quite interesting. But I did read a book about sense of humor maybe last week, probably the end of last week. And like you were saying, it sounds ridiculous making people laugh, but it releases a lot of tension. It releases a lot of stress. Um, and like maybe that what that person is going through in that moment, that it takes their mind off what they're going through.
Mhm.
And people really do miss out on what how important laughter is. How
Yeah.
important it is to release those type of that type of stress, that type of feeling, how important it is. People think it's a waste of time, but like no, laughter is actually really important. It's just like working out, getting sleep. You
Mhm.
need to laugh. You need to release certain things that can't stay in your body. And like I think it's important to laugh. I think it's
Yeah.
important to find something that makes you laugh. Find something that makes you feel good. I don't know. Like I'm not a comedian in no type of way. I think it's cool what you guys do, having that ability to make people laugh. But I do love seeing the joy on people's face. Like if I can take your mind off something you were going through, I feel good about that. And
Mhm.
I think it's important what comedians do. I don't know. Comedians don't get a lot of credit for what they do. And it's hard to make people laugh. Even if you're not trying to, just like trying to find out what is it that they like. Oh, let me say this. Maybe they like this. But like it's an important job, bro. And like if you can make somebody laugh, that is the equivalent of I don't know, like making somebody feel good about themselves mentally, like physically, So I think a lot of people miss that benefit that laughter gives people.
Yeah. But it helps us too. Last thing, and like, yeah, we can move on. Last thing I'll say about like stand up is we get that as well. It's like it's not just like it's obviously making people feel good makes you feel good, right? But it's also like you said, able to just express yourself, tell some story, whether it's remotely serious or not, whether it's true or not. I've completely made up things that have no lick of truth to them at all, but they still give me like some. It's fun. It's just fun, and yeah, I highly recommend anyone who listens to this who's thought about trying stand up at some point. I highly, highly, highly couldn't recommend it enough. It is scary. It is like nerve wracking when you first start it, but it is so worth it. And also, most people do very well their first time, in my experience. So if that
Yes.
makes anyone want to go and try it, then go do it and go love it because and do anything. So open, you can do whatever you want. So yeah.
Yeah, man.
Anyway,
For the people listening, man, just take advantage of laughing at things. Take advantage of what benefit you get from it. So people are listening, man. Don't think this is silly, but it's a quick, simple message. Whatever. I want to say something quickly. My heart goes out to the family members of Nashville shooting. It's unfortunate that this continues to happen. Unfortunately, 6 lives were taken, three children three adults. And we don't know what the motive was. But it's unfortunate that we continue to get things like this. And I don't know, when when you're so used to these kind of problems, you kind of get accustomed to it, which is really sad. Now you have schools that are training students, to prepare for these kind of things. And I don't know. I guess my question to you is, why does this continue to be a problem? Why do we continue to hear case after case of a school
Well,
shooting? Why is this continue to happen? Because it's sad, man, that we're losing innocent people to people's mental issues and people having the motive to do these kind of things. Why does this continue to be a problem?
well, it continues. The answer is that there are too many guns. Like there are always other things that contribute to any of these horrible instances. Um, the issue is just a lack of regulation of firearms in the United States. The reason that it continues is partially because of the NRA. Now, the NRA is like a boogeyman for lots of people. And if any of your listeners own guns or have guns, I'm not like I'm not really extreme on this issue. I don't want guns to be taken from people. I don't I'm fine with things like national registry is never going to be put in place because of the NRA, because they're telling people that the government is doing that so they'll specifically go take their guns, when it's really to take people's guns away who are potentially dangerous. Like anyone who's committed an act of domestic violence shouldn't be allowed to get a firearm. There are lots of places in the world where to own a gun, you have to ask like ex-partners and stuff like that have to approve of you having a gun. And the NRA, one of the big issues with the NRA is that, let's say you have like a Republican senator or a Republican House representative member from Maine, right? In a rural area where like the understanding is they're going to be fairly anti-gun control. Um, what the NRA does is that person who is like pro Second Amendment, anti gun regulation generally, it takes that person who might still be okay with certain things like stronger background checks. Like lots of gun owners agree with the background checks. Lots of gun owners agree with like certain policies that aren't particularly extreme. And the issue is that because they're getting money from the NRA, even if they would be fine giving that little bit of space, like giving an inch and like conceding to certain things and working with people on like gun regulation, they can't do it because they would lose a massive amount of their funding, or they could potentially get primaried into like, or they could be primaried by another Republican or another Democrat if it's a Democrat that that will just say no to absolutely everything that comes to the table. So that's one of the bigger issues with it, is because you have the NRA that really makes it almost impossible for any gun regulation to get through. That's the reason it continues to happen. Now, individual instances, yeah, like I actually I don't like, we always mention mental health only seems to come up when there's a mass shooting, in my opinion. We
Yeah.
don't talk about I like I have medications, I go to therapy. I'm big, and partially I can partially do that because I can afford it here in Poland. I was not able to afford it in the US. I care about that very strongly, but it's only brought up when someone commits a horrible act. And if the person didn't have access to a gun, their mental health wouldn't wouldn't have manifested itself like that. And also, most people with mental health issues are not violent. Most people with mental health issues, their symptoms could be, oh, they wear sweatpants or are eating too much at the time and don't want to leave their house because they're feeling depressed. That's more how it manifests itself than in violence. It's a massive stereotype. It's massive, like, falsehood that is kind of portrayed in lots of films and things like that, of the mentally ill person is
Yeah.
committing violence, and that's so much, they're way more likely to be victims of crimes than commit crimes. So yeah, I know I just said a
Yeah,
ton of
no,
stuff. I
no,
want
no,
you to give me
no.
your response.
It's interesting that you brought that up because I feel like because of that, mental health gets a bad rap. Like, it gets a bad rap, and it's like, okay, oh, you have mental problems. All right, let's be careful of this person. Maybe this person can shoot up a school or do something crazy, but like, it's because of those stereotypes and what uh history has made itself that if you have mental health issues that you're borderline insane. And I think that's not fair because people with mental health issues, as you stated earlier, not all of them they don't think like that. They think about their problems, and it can be small problems like, oh, I have a fear of going outside. Oh, I have this, and it has nothing to do with that so extreme. So when you hear about these mass killings and you hear about, oh, this person was sick in the head, it's more
Mhm.
to that. It's not mental health, it's something else. It's a motive, it's a calculating plan that they have. It's not because they're going crazy. Some of these people are
Mhm.
actually very smart, and they can control their thoughts. They just they do an insane thing. That's what it is. And I
Mhm.
hate that it's linked to mental health because it's not fair. Because when you hear about somebody going through a tough time and they are mentally down, you think this person is crazy, and that it's not fair. And it's because of what we've heard history and how history plays itself and how mental health is looked. And I'm happy you bring that up because now we use it as an excuse, like, oh well, this person had mental health, so it's the reason why he did this, and it's like, no, it's
It was completely unpreventable because the person may have had an issue with their mental health,
not
essentially.
right,
That's what it comes off as most of the time, to me
right.
anyway.
So if we do a test about gun permits, what do you think the test should be? Do you think, for an example, if in order for you to own a gun, you have to go through this type of test? What do you think these tests should make up in order to own
Well,
a firearm?
lots of places like in the US, like background checks are a thing like most gun owners go through actually. A background check is things like criminal records and things like that. I'm for background checks, but I would like them to be universal, meaning like they should be every single time you go in anywhere, you should have a background check. That's a start. I'm not gonna lie, man. I'm not an expert on guns themselves. I've literally fired a gun on one occasion my entire life, up in Maine during Thanksgiving with my friend's grandfather, and it was great fun. It was great fun. But I would say like gun owners, like responsible gun owners, which is a massive majority of them, by the way.
Yeah,
Like if we can get them on board, they would have a better idea on certain things in terms of gun safety. There's lots of gun safety courses. I think that they should be a requirement. They probably are in lots of states, actually. But like things like psychological tests to some extent, anyway. Um, Again, especially like if you have a partner, asking past partners is a really, really important thing. Because lots of people are killed by their domestic partner in the United States with a
yeah,
firearm.
yeah.
So I think like if you've committed any act of anything related to domestic violence, sorry, I can't speak today, to domestic
Sorry.
violence, you should not be allowed within 20 feet of a gun. Like obviously you can't do that, but like you shouldn't be able to get a gun at all if you have anything on your record relating to domestic violence. And there are lots of laws that already exist like that, to be fair. Sometimes the issue comes with implementing them and implementing them properly and implementing them strictly. And that's not down to what the law is sometimes. Sometimes that's down to how the court or the judge or how they decide to deal with the issue or the domestic disturbance or whatever, or something of that nature.
Yeah.
Um, I would say any gun owners who are listening, who have contact with you and can reach out to you, maybe that's a good pet question to pose to people who listen to this podcast who have more experience with firearms than I do, because I think that it's not really fair of me to say certain things about it in terms of like the safety when I know very, very little about firearms themselves. I know the
Right.
effect they have, but I see statistics and stuff like that. But it would be a little bit out of my depth to go into the exact details of what should be on those tests. Again, to sum what I just set up, universal background check for all the time. Things related to asking partners if they think that it's okay for them to have a firearm, and some sort of psychological test, but I don't know what the details of that would be, as I'm not a psychologist. Yeah, I hope that
No, 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 bro.
covers.
I respect the honesty. I don't know really. We're just giving opinions. I don't really know that much about it either. But I know if in order for us to do a test, it would have to be one every year because
Mhm.
people, mentally you change every year. I think every year would be a great thing. And I think
Mhm.
when it comes to psychological tests, I think it's important to put them in a certain situation where you feel like you need to use the gun, but it's not necessary. If you get what I'm
Mhm.
saying, like I think it's
Yeah, that's
important.
interesting.
I think it's important. Like put them in a situation where they feel that they have no type of power and they feel like they have fear. And
Mhm.
would they use a gun or not? I think that would be a good test to put them through. But no, I don't really have that much knowledge about it either. But I think it's important to do a test every year, every year, not
Mhm.
not a once in a lifetime thing. I think every year to check where people's mental level is, to check if they are capable of having one. I think would be
And
necessary.
yeah, the one thing that we haven't mentioned yet, and it's part of the psychological evaluation that I would like there to be, is lots of gun deaths are suicides. So many gun deaths in the United States are suicides.
Yeah.
So it's like it's not just whether or not you're mentally fit enough to own a gun because you won't harm other people, but are you in a place where you might eventually harm yourself? And what's unfortunate is that there's really no way of, if you have guns in the United States, and we have the Second Amendment, whether we like it or not, it's there. People do have the right to have firearms, but it's kind of sad that you can be perfectly fine 1 year, or you can be perfectly fine 1 month, and you have a firearm, and you could have even taken one of those tests at one point. I do think it would help. I still would support that policy, but
Mm.
suicide is a massive issue in the United States, full stop. And then you add guns on top of it, which makes the issue exacerbated. It exacerbates what's already a serious problem in the state. So that's another big thing with the mental health checks, just for prevention of that rather
Yeah.
than hurting other people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I totally agree. So why here's a out of the ballpark question. Why are we spending so much money on guns and weapons per year? I think we spend what over it's in the trillions. I know that. Why is that why do we focus all of our attention on weapons? Why are we spending in a mass amount of money on weapons every year?
I mean that is a really fascinating question. I
Because it's
mean,
ridiculous. It's
as
ridiculous. Trillions
it's
of
ridiculous,
dollars
yeah.
every year.
And you mean this is like personal sales of firearms, correct? Like people buying guns, or do you mean the
This
United States as a
this
government?
is this is people buying firearms. This is military. This is all together.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
Why
I
why
mean,
are we spending all of our money on weapons?
so the it's obviously super complicated answer to that, but in terms of individuals, the answer is I really just don't know. as an example, whenever there's, oh, gosh, please don't quote me on this. I don't like when I don't have like a cited source,
It's all good.
but I've heard in the past anyway that at least occasionally when there's a mass shooting, gun sales of guns go up. And it's not for protection necessarily. It's because they think there's going to be more gun regulation potentially. So people go out and buy guns. That's one very
Ooh,
specific example.
ooh.
But I'm not really sure. I I think yeah, I just don't know. I don't know if hunting is becoming more popular. I don't know if just I don't know if there's been a sale recently. Like literally, that's how clueless I am as to like why it would be going up that much. But in terms of the United States, obviously I'm in Poland, which is right next to Ukraine. Um, I'm happy to some extent. I'm not to some extent. I'm immensely happy that the United States is supplying Ukraine with weapons at the moment. I'm very happy with that.
Mhm.
However, this won't shock people based off the opinions I've already expressed that I'm not a massive fan of the military industrial complex. To sum up what that is, if anyone doesn't know, it's basically there's so many private entities that sell and like make weapons, and then government has to have contracts and buy these weapons from them. And the reason that it's hard to just instantly stop that is because there are lots of people with very, very specialized skills making it could just be like one tiny part of a tank, of a giant tank that these people are trained to make. And if you just say we're going to completely cut all of that off, you have to find a way of then also making sure these people, often in rural areas where there are fewer job opportunities outside of these things, are taken care of. And it's not the easiest thing to just like immediately stop spending as much as we do on defense. Now that we could cut it significantly without that being a massive issue, and I would support that. But there are good things that are done strangely with those weapons. And again, I'm very biased. I have so many Ukrainian friends here. Lots of my Ukrainian friends here are refugees. And so I am aware that I have a specific emotional bias on that. I'm very, very passionate. I don't think Biden's done enough. I think that they need to have a no-fly zone.
Sleepy
And a lot of my
Joe.
friends, yeah, yeah, like,
Sleepy Joe, man.
yeah,
Uh,
basically, but like honestly, a lot of people who would agree, who would be quote unquote like on my part of the political spectrum, would completely disagree with it, like a lot of what I just said. And that's fine. It's like, and I understand where they're coming from, but
right.
there people think that we need to make it. Sorry, this is going off topic slightly, but it's like people think we need to quote unquote make a deal with Putin when that's what we did in 2014 for Crimea, and then he just fucking invaded again anyway. So
Yeah.
it would just be he wants the Ukrainian people gone, and our weapons are going there and making it really difficult for the Russian forces to advance. And that is one of the good things. But yeah, supplying, we also, at the same time, we supply the Saudi Arabian government with lots of weapons, and they're causing mass issues in Yemen, as an example. Um, uh, we supply lots of militaries that aren't quote unquote fighting the same kind of fight that it seems to be in Ukraine, at least in my perspective.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it is like the amount, it is strange, the amount of weapons that we send out to the rest of the world is just like
It's
remarkable.
strange,
Meaning
man.
like,
It's
but
strange.
remarkable meaning the number of it, like
Yeah, it's weird, man, because when you actually do your research and you realize, oh my God, we're supplying them, we're supplying them. Why are we supplying? We're supplying them. It's
oil for
like,
some massive reason.
yeah,
That's one
it is
reason. That's
like,
one reason.
and then we're over here and speaking about stop the violence, spread the peace. It's like, yo, but we're supplying all these countries that are about that life, are willing to die
Yeah,
for, you know what I'm saying? Like these hungry countries hungry, meaning like they are ready for war. And it's like, why are we supplying these type of people if we're over here saying another
We
thing? It's really
we
weird.
heavily we have always supplied Turkey as an example. I don't know if you know, like the like Turkey as a dictator, Erdogan, and
I know a little bit. I know a little bit. I know a little bit.
he's a
Yeah.
bastard, man. He's a really really evil character. None of my Turkish friends like him, by the way. Like the ones who live here. Like I don't think I've ever met someone who actually a Turkish person who actually likes him, to be honest.
How could you?
Um, but Erdogan is heavily funded and supplied by the U.S. military. But we've been doing this with Turkey specifically, way longer before, way before Erdogan, and we've had to do things like there is the Armenian genocide that happened in Turkey. Absolutely horrendous genocide of attempted relocation and extermination of Armenians. And we have to basically say, we're not going to talk about this because we have to have them as an ally because of Russia. So, or quote unquote, have to have them as an ally. That would be up for debate with people much more intelligent than I am. But it's messed up. It's messed up, and a lot of this is still remnants of the Cold War, even. And yeah, like if you don't know, the Marshall Plan was when after communism fell in lots of Eastern Europe, we just gave the Eastern Bloc a lot of money. Now, obviously, part of that was to help transition to a capitalist system, um, which is good, obviously, which is like was helpful, especially for the regimes that were controlling them at the time.
Hmm.
But we also did it to say "f you" to Russia and to the Soviet Union. It was both of those things equally. So we've always used our influence in sometimes good ways and oftentimes bad ways. I know that sounds like a
Often,
really,
yeah.
very really
Yeah,
simple way
yeah.
of putting it, but
Yeah.
yeah.
It
Um,
it it's kind of hard to. I remember getting an idea of it when I watched. I think it was the 9/11. Michael Moore. You know Michael Moore. He's a big
yeah,
he
yeah.
does documentaries. He had one on 9/11, and I remember watching that one specifically. And I remember seeing George Bush and his family, hanging out with Bin Laden and his family. Not Bin Laden, but Bin Laden's family.
Bin
And
Laden's
I
family.
remember,
Yeah.
and I remember, I remember specifically in the part of the documentary where Michael Moore was like, "Yeah, most of these weapons were funded by the United States," and I was
Yeah,
like,
we funded the Taliban. We
"Yeah,
started by funding the Taliban against
yeah,
communists. That's
yeah."
how that started.
And I remember because this came out ages ago. I think I was around like maybe 13, 14, chilling in high school, not really giving a fuck about life at the time. And I was watching this and I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So you're trying to tell me this whole time, and you know what? 9/11 was a very bad thing, and my heart will always go out to the families that lost their significant other, their grandfather, whatever. But it's like, would this would have happened if we didn't fund those weapons? Would it kind of gave me a bunch of thoughts that I wasn't really thinking about at the time, and it really blew my mind. It was just like,
Very likely. It's like playing on alternate history is a dangerous thing sometimes, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like it would have to me, but like I don't know all of the details of um yeah, but that's a really interesting idea. It's like
yeah,
would this have happened
it
if
blew
we
it blew
didn't?
my mind, man. And obviously when you start to get this curious thought, you want to do your own research, right? So
Mhm.
I started looking things up and I was just like, oh my God, we are our own enemy. But I didn't know this before, right? Like I was ignorant. I didn't know a lot about our history, but then I started realizing that we're our own enemy. Like we have the most powerful weapons. We're distributing to these places where they train military every single day of their life, and it's
Mm.
like we're pretty much making our bed and we're laying in it. And in these cases, it's sad because a lot of that money that we use on weapons can go to education, can go to better food, can go to healthcare, can go to, possibly getting free education. And it's just
Mm.
like when we have so much money and we're distributing it to all these countries, it's like we don't even care about what's going on in our country. And it's sad,
Yeah,
you know?
I think that's like a lot of, as an example, like where like me and like a lot of libertarians would like obviously I would disagree with a lot of things libertarians believe, but one of the things is like defense spending. They also agree. People who want smaller government agree that they want the defense spending to be cut. Um, it's not like I said before. It is. I wish it was like it should be done, and it can be, but it can't be done all at once. And the issue is that we have alliances. We have like not necessarily like we have treaties, truces, contracts with other governments, and like it's partially because we spend so much on defense. And yeah, I agree. It can go so many other places. Whenever you talk about like when people we were talking about the Build Back Better plan, which was the Biden administration's which I believe it did pass actually, trying to rebuild the economy and change how the economy functions a little bit.
Mm.
Everyone said, even it could be on CNN, MSNBC, so many people who, even liberals, even just like wealthy liberals saying things like, oh, yeah, but how are we going to pay for this? It's like, well, you don't ask that when you vote for the defense budgets.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
don't do
yeah, yeah.
that. You
Yeah.
don't do it in that instance. But now when we want to like pay for free preschool, now as soon as that comes up, it's a massive issue. Build Back Better is like a really like, extensive thing. It's a lot more than that. But one of the big things in it was universal childcare. And
Yeah.
we're debating whether or not we can pay for that, but then not, never like re-upping and increasing the budget of the Pentagon all the time without a question. It's just something like Democrats and Republicans both do with some kind of consistency. They'll question things like Build Back Better and then always approve whatever defense budget the Pentagon wants, whenever,
Yeah.
because the way voters work, unfortunately. But
Yeah, it's unfortunate. So let me ask you this question before we move on.
Mhm.
Um, what do you think needs to change about the budgeting for weapons? What do you think because we obviously we do unfortunately we do need some type of protection. We do need weapons, unfortunately. That's just how the world is. Humans are crazy. We're evil. Uh, but what can we do to like benefit it for all of us? And like, do you think we should be having like an equal balance of like spend here, spend there, or do you think we should just lower the spending for weapons? What do you think we should do moving forward?
um, yeah, of course, like one of the it's fairly simple actually, in some senses. Um, there are, as an example, we make so many fighter jets and so many tanks that aren't even in use because we've had the contracts with the weapons manufacturers. And things like we don't need giant fields full of fighter planes that aren't in use anymore or are outdated or they've been created like they've tried to create like really high tech fighter jets and the pilots don't like them as much as the old ones because they think that the other ones work better. Now obviously I can't speak for every pilot in the United States in the oh my gosh, in the Navy or the Air Force.
Mm.
But like there are some things where we just spend for almost no reason, and you would have to then put programs into place to help the people who would potentially lose their jobs, people who make the weapons. Um, in terms of things overseas, I don't think we should be funding Saudi Arabia basically at all. It would really be hard to do that specifically, because of our trade deals and because of course, oil. But the way that we can get away from that is changing to more renewable energies that we can produce in the United States, so we don't rely as much on oil, as an example. We should be highly questioning what Israel is doing in Palestine. Well,
Speak on
literally
it, brother.
continuing
Speak
to
on it.
invade,
Yeah,
because we if we're going to, so Israel actually strangely enough is not strangely enough is a big ally of ours, and there are things that Israel do that are positive for that region, but the way that they treat the Palestinians, they essentially, the government of Israel anyway, not Israeli people necessarily,
mm.
don't seem to want them to exist, and they make that more obvious all the time. And of course, the Israel-Palestine conflict obviously is insanely complicated. I wouldn't
Man, it's
claim to be
scary. It's
an
scary.
expert on it. Wouldn't claim to be an expert on it at all. And there's lots of nuance to it. And it's far, far, far from black and white. But we're funding this, and we need to question that more. Protect the Palestinian people from any kind of invasion. The settlements that were made basically to just invade parts of Palestine by Israel. We need to question things of that nature a bit more often and pull funding in the right circumstances. Um, Also, we just have military bases everywhere. Like, do we need
Where?
military bases in Germany right now?
How many are there?
In Germany, there are quite a few. I wouldn't claim to know the exact number, but in Germany, there are lots of American military bases. There's an American military base less than, I don't know, maybe a couple hours by train from me. I mean, that one makes a little bit more sense because it's right by that part of Russia, like because Poland borders a part of Russia.
Hmm.
But there are plenty of military bases that don't necessarily need to be there. Um, just roll back, focus more on intelligence and roll back things like just supplying weapons because we don't know what they're going to do with them all the time. Um, and that again, like, is I don't have. I wish I had all the answers. I wish I had a crystal ball, but that's one of the ways that. Well, that's one of the ways that I would do it. Also, but they also need to spend money on keep protecting the veterans. Like they don't even fund the VA properly. So like you can
Mm.
cut defense spending, but you cut defense spending, but still but increase the spending on things like the VA
Yeah.
because we have tons of people who have serious issues with post-traumatic stress disorder
Hmm.
going to fight in wars that maybe we shouldn't even be fighting in the first place, but nonetheless, they still did that for the US government and they're not getting treated properly. And
No, no.
like,
And I don't mean to cut you
yeah,
off, but like
no, it's
Vietnam, I
fine.
think Vietnam is a good example of that. A lot of people that returned from Vietnam didn't know how to handle life as a civilian. They didn't know how to, cope with the things that were going on, and a lot of them became homeless. And
Mhm.
a big percent, I'm not going to say all because that would be ignorant, but a lot of the homeless population makes up for veterans. And I think it is sad because, they do protect the country. They put their hard work and their effort into protecting, and the treatment they get after leaving, whether it's post traumatic stress, disability, they don't get any of that. And like I think it's a lot I think it causes a lot of problems, and I think a lot of people don't talk about it enough, especially people that are in the service, people representing the service. they don't really talk about what happens after. They just talk about
Mm.
what is going on and protecting the country, but it's never about the veterans. And I think it's important because they were in that fight before, and like the way they get treated is unfair, bro. I can't even explain what they go through and how they end up homeless. It's really sad. It's really
Yeah,
sad.
and like I don't know, like this was big news topic maybe like 5, 6 years ago, but the VA specifically, even just like their filing systems and stuff like that. Like I've seen stories where they need to, like, this is the VA of like the most advanced military in the world, and they're still using filing, like literally rooms of documents and papers that need to be digitized, and like we can't. Well, it's just yeah, it's what it is, man. Like
It is what it is.
nothing.
So let's talk about the Joe Biden Kamala Harris administration. What are your opinions on it? Because I think going into before his presidency, I think what was going through everybody's mind is like, well, we can't get any better than what we're with now. And I think the whole election, watching, to be honest, watching those debates were a joke for me. I thought it was all just for fun. It was TV. But
Yeah,
going into this election, I realized we have no solution. We just have to deal with deal with what's going on, and we kind of have to accept what is in front of us. I am a little upset Bernie Sanders kind of quit on us last minute. I thought he would. He had potentially. He arguably could have been the greatest president of all time, but that's another topic for another day.
Mhm.
I'm upset about that. But
Yeah.
you think Joe Biden? You think him and Kamala have made a difference, or do you feel like it's kind of the same shit, different year? Do you think
No,
what?
well,
Go ahead.
it, I'll say it's certainly not. It's certainly not the same shit as like our last president, because Biden, they've rolled back a lot of the more negative and controversial things that Trump did with executive orders.
Mm,
It is yeah, it is better. It is one of the more strangely, because it's Joe Biden and because of his past and the way he's voted in the past, he's been more progressive than I thought he would be personally.
mm,
Obviously, I'm still not happy with everything. As the big thing is, there's a guideline. I forget what the title of it is, but that prevents us from taking in, it allows us to say no to refugees coming to the country because of COVID. And that's not really, it's not obviously, it's not that COVID doesn't exist anymore, but they can get rid of that now. And the Biden administration has specifically said and defended keeping that law, which says no to like refugees coming and trying to seek asylum.
mm.
Um, which is strange because on his campaign website it says he's open to immigration. He thinks it's a strong aspect, and I think he might believe that to some extent. But that's one example of something he hasn't reversed, and that's a decision. It's like the inaction is still a decision a lot of the time. So that's something I'm not particularly happy with. But overall, like what I say, it is just significantly better than the 4 years before prior. And um I don't know, like I voted for him from here. Nope, sorry. I voted for him. I wasn't particularly happy with the pick, obviously, which won't surprise you or anyone listening,
Who
obviously.
was? Who
I have
was, bro?
massive, massive issues with him as a person, on top of just the policies he supported in the past. I do like the fact he has gone back on some of the things that he used to support, such as police reform. Now, they're not doing as much as I would like them to do, but
Yeah.
um, they are at least least in terms of his rhetoric, at least in terms of the way he's speaking, he knows that the crime bill in like 1995, 1996, that he supported and co-sponsored created lots of issues, and he knows that. He knows that, and he in the last couple of years he has made statements on it, and I think that that is some level of growth. Doesn't help that Kamala Harris was also a prosecutor that prosecuted three strike and mandatory minimums and three strike laws and stuff like that. So she's not the greatest on that issue either. But in terms of what they've done, I don't actually know any specific policies they put forward on that. But in terms of the way they speak and their rhetoric on that is a lot better than what you had prior, and it's even a lot better than when Vice President Joe Biden's rhetoric was, honestly. So
Mm.
he's changing a bit, but how you can't expect a 300-year-old man to change too much. Like, anyway, um, I
Oh,
try to be reasonable. I try to be reasonable and try to look at from the perspective of, okay, it's him. What is he doing differently for him? Because you have to accept that he's like I have to accept that he won the Democratic nomination. I have had to accept that. But what can I expect? And I'm trying to be a bit more mature than I was in uni, than I was in college about like
yeah.
these things. But yeah, there are things like allowing trans people back in the military. He did that on like the second day in office and stuff like that. He took back he put back regulations on how easy it is to um use drones and things of that nature very, very quickly. He's not bragging about it, which is strange to me that he put more restrictions on our use of drone strikes, which was a massive controversy during the Obama administration as well.
Mm.
But he's not bragging about it. So it's like he's doing it, which is a good thing, but then he's not using it like politically, which is frankly, if he wants to win the presidency again, what he should be doing. So, um,
Does he have a
yeah,
chance though to win it
yeah,
again? You
I
think so?
think he does. Um, uh, well, we still need to see, like, obviously the former president was just indicted. I don't think anything's actually gonna happen in terms of, like Trump's
Prison time
not
or
gonna go
anything
to
like that?
jail.
No, he's not.
But
No.
Donald Trump is not gonna go to jail. Let's be real. Like, he's not like, I'm not gonna comment on exactly what happened because that is not the only crime he's committed. Um, so I don't want to get into the weeds of talking about a porn star. It's all stupid anyway, and it's like and she wants publicity as well. I think, to be fair, but like he's committed a crime. He's been indicted. Now, I don't know if you know this, but the president of Brazil right now, he was also in jail for 10 years or something like that for political corruption, and he just won the presidency again. Much better than the other guy they had, strangely enough. Shows you political situation in Brazil right now. But yeah, just being indicted doesn't mean you can't run for president, obviously. And I'm starting to question whether or not anything he does will actually do anything in terms of his polling data and his popularity. But I think like Biden won more votes than any other president ever, like won because more people voted. The most people voted
I
in the
mean,
last presidential election.
we were desperate. Let's be honest. We were desperate.
Yeah.
We were desperate.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't. With Joe Biden, I'm really kind of frustrated that he won. I think everybody is. First and foremost,
Mm,
Bernie Sanders. Why, why the fuck did you drop out? That pisses me off. But
mm,
I think with Joe Biden, the thing would you talk about the crime bill that passed in 94, 95. I think it's hard for me to get over
mm,
because you can't support a specific group when you did this specific thing to
mm,
kind of put this specific group in prison for petty crimes. I think for me that is something that still I'm still trying to cope with.
mm,
Um and with Kamala Harris too, you know. But I think America really needed we really needed somebody to fill that, and I think Joe Biden just happened to be there at the right time. But in my case, I don't see him winning again.
Mhm.
Um, because a lot of people unfortunately are gravitating towards Trump, and I think a lot of people are starting to believe his BS, his false hope, and I think that's the reason why has a chance of winning this time because of the false hope he gives people and the social media power he has. Nobody, no other president has had so much social media power as him, and
Yeah, that's true.
he's getting
Completely
a lot
true.
of he's getting a lot of recognition from these podcasts and these powerful people, and I think for Joe Biden to win, I think it will it for him he would have to do something extraordinary. And I know free education sounds like a blast from the past. It's never gonna happen, but like if he can do something extraordinary to gain the people's attention going into this next election, I think he has a chance. But as of right now, I think it's for Trump. And I hate to say that because I'm not a Donald Trump supporter in any way. I don't even like Joe Biden, but I think it's the stage is looking bright for Trump going into this next
Yeah,
election
the
because
reason,
of
yeah,
the power.
yeah. I mean, like it is completely true. He has lots of, but he is kicked off Twitter as an example for inciting violence and trying to overthrow
Yeah.
our democracy. That's um there. There are a lot of reasons. Like I don't want to make it seem like I'm like certain. Like I've never even like obviously I studied politics, but I was never really interested. I had no interest in watching the debates. Just like you said, I find them boring and mostly useless. Not completely, but like
Yeah.
it's really for the news organizations to make money and for them to get like cheap little hits at each other. And they don't really end up talking about significant policy. I know, which is boring, by the way. No one would watch that, but like that's what you would actually need to have.
Right.
Anyway, um, you put you, you put Trump as like 100%. He's almost 100% going to be the nominee. DeSantis hasn't even said that he was going to run yet, and his numbers are already dropping because Trump called him a meatball, or whatever the fuck he said. Like, um, but this is what's happening in New York right now. Is it's not nothing. It is not nothing. He's finally actually been indicted for a crime. He will be in court. Now, they like to say, meaning like some Trump supporters, well, specifically him and his family, have said that this will help him. And I see strangely enough, I see where they're coming from because it can rile up like his supporters. It can really rile them up and be like, oh, they're politically persecuting him, which is what they genuinely believe.
Hmm.
They think that this is just complete nonsense and that he's completely innocent. He's done nothing wrong. And yeah, that can rile up a certain part of your base. But again, I don't know. Like Biden won by a fair amount last time. Of course, it's a different circumstance. Winning a second term isn't always easy, but he is the
Hmm.
incumbent now, which in theory should help him. Um, Also, the question of there have been questions of whether or not he would step down and let Kamala Harris be the nominee. It's not a 0% chance that he's going to do that. I don't know how I feel about that. Um, but there are lots of things. It's still in a while. Like there's so many things that can come up. We don't know everything. It's really, really early on uh, for me to guess at what's going to happen because I don't know. Like Kanye West might enter next week or for all I know, and
Yeah.
Trump won't be particularly happy with that. They already had a spat about that. I don't know if you know about that.
No,
They had
I
like
know about it. I know
an
about it.
argument about it, but like yeah, I don't want to get into yay at the moment. But like yeah, man, the lack of my ramblings and strange ramblings basically just mean I don't fucking know. I have no
Yeah.
idea, man.
Who does know? That who does? My question is, what would you like to see Joe do for him to gain presidency for the second time? Like, would you like to see the unemployment rate go down? Would you like free college tuition, healthcare? What is one thing that Joe needs to do in order to
Well,
maintain his position?
well, his Fed, which is not directly controlled by him, just change interest rates, which they know will cause higher levels of unemployment. So that's not going to happen. Like that's due to the inflation. Um, uh, what does he need to do? Instead of he needs like complete debt relief at the very least. You would have to get free public college education. You would have to get people who you would have to convince people who would never who think that that's just socialism and communism that suddenly that's a good idea, and I don't really see that happening just practically. um if we pushed harder for it, that would mean something because that would be like him trying to do it, but I think he's fighting his battles in different places, I guess. I think yeah, debt relief for everyone who has student loan debt. um
And do
uh,
you own do you don't if you don't mind me asking, do you owe any debt?
No, actually, I'm very, very fortunate with that
Oh, good
because
for
when
you.
my mother moved in with my stepfather, and when that happened, when we sold our childhood home, my mom was able to pay off my sisters and my college education, and that's just like unheard of. That's like most people I know struggle with college debt, and I'm insanely lucky to not be in that situation. But I do think that that doesn't change my opinion on it. Obviously, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it should be relieved. Like, let's be real, man. I'm a white guy whose parents were both born in the late 50s. It was a lot easier to transfer property, which so it's a lot more likely that someone looks like me will have situations like this happen than than black people in the U.S. Specifically. So it's like all of these things are connected, and debt relief is just it should be free. I agree with you there. It's just whether or not that can be done. If he did the $50,000 at least instead of the 10,000 that he proposed but still hasn't done for whatever reason,
Mm.
that would even be nice. But yeah, there are things like I said before. I touched on it earlier. I think certain things like in the summer, the Russians will start their offensive again in Ukraine. And if he implements a no-fly zone, because lots of the innocent people dying in Ukraine are being killed by planes just dropping bombs on populated areas, there's a no-fly zone. It would basically mean that we would have fighter pilots shooting down any bombers, essentially, making it so that they can't just like bomb people indiscriminately. Now they say no to that, and lots of people say no to that, and it's quite an understandable reaction. Is they say, well, okay, well that will be American soldiers shooting Russian soldiers, which is that's more like direct. But Putin already considers himself at war with us. So Biden, in my opinion, that's a really, really big thing that he can do.
Mm.
Um, it would be controversial for the global community. Actually, the EU has asked them not to do that specifically, but I think that that would save a lot of people's lives, and to me, that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Um,
What about the health insurance?
and
The free health?
healthcare, yeah, I'm for like as yourself, I'm for Medicare for all. I'm for Bernie's plan specifically, that he has put on the table like multiple times in different forms.
Yeah.
Is insanely generous. It is expensive, but again, we don't talk about expense on these when it's to help the worker, when it's to help like normal people, we suddenly start talking about expenses. But when it's about like giving tax breaks to giant corporations and stuff. The budget isn't even mentioned. I'm for the Medicare for all plan. Biden just doesn't believe that. So it's just not gonna. I wish he did, of course. I wish that he was a bit more progressive on that issue, or just progressive at all on that issue. But that's not something I can expect from him, really. Things that Biden could do, that would be the within the realm of his like political philosophy, would be expanding Medicare significantly, and also forgiving people's medical debts as well. But it's hard to know how they would implement that. It's uh, it would just be so much more simple if we just already had these programs and had to tweak them, like had the core of people have the right to have health care, and then you move on from that. But in the United States, you don't. So it's a much more difficult conversation
Yeah.
because of that. Yeah. Oh, one last thing, one small thing I didn't know about until very recently. When I was like doing a bit of research for this podcast, one of Bernie's plan, um, the most recent version of it, also helps people who work in the insurance industry who would potentially lose their jobs. Meaning, like, he wants to account for the negative aspects that the negative things that can happen from Medicare for all, which it would simply be not simply, it would be people like losing their jobs if they're in certain industries. He wants to account for that, which I think is it takes away another argument against it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I don't have anything else. Uh, I don't think, I'll be honest, I don't think he's doing a terrible job. I think he's doing a better job, meaning Biden. I think he's doing better than I thought he would do, like I said. And he's been a bit slightly more progressive, at least in his rhetoric and at least in the way that he's speaking, which is still good.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's what it is. We knew during the primary, we knew, man. Like
We
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 knew
knew.
what it
We
was
knew.
like.
I think a good word would be the country's on cruise control. Like
Mhm.
it's not really progressing, it's not really going anywhere. We kind of accept it for what it is, and we're kind of just living with it day by day. I think that's what I would say about his presidency. It's cruise control. Like
Mhm.
nothing's really progressing, nothing's really getting worse, nothing's really getting better, but we're on a path and we accept it for what it is. Now it is better than what it was before, but
Mhm.
it is not the greatest, and I think we're just okay with accepting being on cruise control. That's what I
Yeah.
would put his presidency as. Yeah.
If Biden was able to put through that assault weapons ban, that would be big. I don't see it happening, but if he was able to somehow get that through, that would be another example of that would be absolutely immense. That would be so important because people don't need assault weapons. It's like, I'm sorry, you can hunt. I understand it's your hobby. I understand it might be cool to have an assault weapon. I fired one here in Poland, actually. Sorry, that's the only other time I've used a gun is at a gun range in Poland, strangely enough.
Yeah.
I used a semi-automatic weapon, but it's in a gun range where it can't leave the can't leave the gun range. Um, so but that would be big. You don't need an automatic or semi-automatic weapon, in my opinion. But
Oh,
five presidents, right?
five presidents. Yes.
Yeah,
Give me your
top
top
five.
five.
I mean, that's rolling my sleeves up, literally. I mean, my favorite president is Abraham Lincoln. I know that's super cliche, but the more I've learned about him, the more you learn that he really wasn't just this like really calm, super nice guy. He was actually insanely aggressive in his policies, called a tyrant, but he used the power that he had at the time to try to end slavery effectively. And the way in which he did it and how classy he was in terms of how he handled the Civil War. So he's probably my favorite because that's probably the biggest impact a president has ever had, ever. Um, of course, like I'm a big fan. Probably Jimmy Carter is probably second for me.
Yeah, I
We
was
didn't
gonna
have a
put.
lot of
I was gonna put him either one or two. Yeah,
Carter had a rough economy to deal with, but he also we didn't have lots of wars. He was trying to change and progress the country in terms of workers' rights again after the New Deal, and he also he was a one-term president, and part of frankly just that not even just him as a president, but he's like 90 something years old and he's still trying to just like eradicate malaria from different parts of Africa. Like this is a person who has a deep love and he's very religious actually. That's why
yeah,
he
he's
like
very
part of this
religious.
like
Yeah,
super religious. I could be wrong. He might be could be a Baptist, but I'm not really sure which. He's Christian some way,
it's
and
unfortunate.
yeah.
It's
Mhm.
unfortunate because the end of his presidency, he wasn't able to get those people back from the
Mhm.
kidnapping, and I think that's where it kind of went wrong. But to me, honestly, if that did not happen, he could have arguably been the greatest president of all time.
Yeah, yeah. I like yeah, just him as a person. He's just incredible, just an incredible
Incredible.
human being
Yeah.
outside of his presidency as well. And
Yeah.
then from then I'd really have to think because
It's
I'm a
difficult,
fan
man.
of Kennedy's like specifically his speeches. I wasn't alive. Obviously, I also wasn't alive when Lincoln was around, but um, specifically John F. Kennedy's speeches and the way that he spoke to people. Um, really, I'm a massive fan of that. In terms of his policies and stuff, I know obviously I know about the Bay of Pigs and things that went wrong, but in terms of just his rhetoric and the way that he spoke was quite good, which strangely it's not policy, but rhetoric and the way that your leader speaks is important to some extent anyway. So it's not
Mm.
nothing. And then probably Obama and then Biden, I guess. Like I know
Ooh,
that sounds like
sleepy.
strange
Yeah,
because
Sleepy Joe at five. Ooh.
yeah, because I'm not gonna lie, like you go too far back in history, it's like you can say like Bill Maher as an example. He said my favorite president is George Washington, and there's lots of interesting things Washington did in terms of founding. Obviously, he was a general in the Revolutionary War, but also he warned against the two-party system. He thought that presidents should only have two terms. All those things I agree with, but the guy was chasing down his slaves when he died. That's not something
Yeah.
people talk about very much.
Yeah, yeah,
He
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
have wooden teeth. He didn't have wooden teeth. He had the teeth of his slaves. So how can you say George Washington is one of your
Yeah.
just like I'm just not the biggest fan of Bill Maher to be honest. So like I'll criticize most of what he says, but yeah. So and it's also just like modern standards, like trying to gauge people on like your modern standards versus like as an example, like I said, like Abraham Lincoln's my favorite president, but he was a fan of he didn't think that black and white people could live together genuinely. He thought that what was best for like black people in the United States was to have them colonize and have them go home essentially. So that's it's a really like
Mm-hmm.
cringy position to have, but at the time it was an immensely anti-slavery position to have. So it is hard to judge people based off of their based off of the time, I guess. And the reason I'd say Obama and Biden would be fairly high up for me is just because, again, they're more recent. They're more recent, so they're going to be slightly more progressive. And going back, like I can't really think of. I don't. I try not to idolize presidents because they don't even have all of the power, I guess. But and I'm not a scholar on like the history of presidents, so I couldn't name most of the presidents for you as an
Yeah,
example.
yeah,
I
yeah,
certainly
yeah.
I could not like oh FDR, I should say FDR. I'll probably put FDR instead of Biden. Should actually be Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It's probably be like fourth, and Obama would be fifth, I guess.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a big one that I missed out on because the New Deal and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. FDR was he. I'm not gonna. I wouldn't put him in my five, but I would. I respect him because of what he did during the time, the Great Depression, all of that stuff, and being able to manage and putting the, I guess, moving the American people towards a a better standpoint.
Hmm.
I would give him the credibility for that. And he did a lot of things that a lot of people couldn't do. And I feel like during that time with the war, the Great Depression, and all these things, I think it was necessary what he did, and I think it was a major turning point in American history. So
Yeah.
I understand why you put him at five. For me, it would be Jimmy. Then I would put Jimmy. I would put Abraham Lincoln, JFK. Well,
Mhm.
all right, JFK, yes, but I do it because of his brother. I'm a big fan of Robert Kennedy. That's the reason why I
Mhm.
put JFK in there. Robert would have been probably he would have probably been one of the greatest as well. I'm gonna put Obama in there. I didn't specifically like his presidency, but I did like uh because I became a fan of Obama when he left office. I read his book. His book's incredible.
Mhm.
And I like what he did when he left. I felt like he was limited to what he wanted to accomplish, and he really didn't do anything for the black community. He kind of did more for the LGBTQ, which is okay too. But
Mhm.
when there's a problem going on in your backyard, you need to take care of that. So I feel like
Yeah.
he missed out on that. But I'm gonna put him in my top five. Um, this one is gonna be tough because I hate to say it. And I'm only going to say it because of in terms of unemployment. And I
Mhm.
hate to say this because I hate him and I hate who he was before he was president. But I'm gonna put Trump in my five. And I'm the reason why I'm gonna put Trump in my five is because the unemployment rate for black people was very low. Uh and that's the only reason. Uh
Mhm.
but I want to say this to the people that are listening. I'm not a Trump supporter. I never will be. I hate the man just as much as people hate him. I hated him before he was president. I used to watch his show, whatever. But it's hard for me not to put him in that five because of what he did for the unemployment rate.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but at the
Yeah.
same time, like the reason unemployment for African Americans was like dropping was through no specific policy of his White House or like
No, it
any
has
of the
nothing.
or
Yeah.
his leadership. It had
Yeah.
to do with the fact it was just a boom in the economy in general, and
Right.
also having like massive tax cuts on the rich give the economy a sugar rush, which is part of why obviously of course also COVID and the war in Ukraine, like it's being the come down from that is being exacerbated by those things, but it would have happened anyway. So it's like
Yeah.
I've seen that. I've seen that, and like I think that that's important. It is important. Like um yeah, the what I would say though too is like we focus as Americans specifically, and I think it's not just Americans. I think it's everyone. We focus a lot on the economy when we think about like who we're voting for and things like that. And that makes perfect sense. You vote with your wallet. If you're broke all the time and you believe or not believe, but if you know that it's because of some policy that this one person is doing, you're gonna probably not want to vote for them. So I understand why people do it, but economies policies affect the economy they don't affect the economy immediately most of the time. So
Mm,
sometimes they can, but normally like the effects of an administration start to take effect properly, like maybe 10 years after they're out of office to some
yeah.
extent. So it's hard to know whether or not that the unemployment rate would have been different if it was like Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton in the White House, if it would have happened otherwise. But yeah, I mean that is an important, like, I'm not gonna diss that too much because it's an important thing to bring
No,
up. And
he just, and I agree with you're saying. He just happened to be there at the right time. That's the only reason why I'm giving him the credibility. He was there at the right time. It could have happened to anybody, of course, but he just happened to be there, and that's the reason why I have
yeah,
to give him the five. It's really difficult because we don't really have a lot of good presidents, so it's kind of
I can take
easy.
that.
It's kind of easy to be. It's like if you don't like, in order for you to be in a top five president, you can just be like working there and just not do anything. You could be a top five, which is really bad. Like if you're not doing anything and you just happen to manage those 4 years, you're easily in the top five. So like I want the people to listen to me clearly. It is very easy to be in the top five. Just don't screw up like everybody else did. So it's hard. Anybody can make a top five horrible presidents list. It's that easy. But the top five good ones, it's like it's either you were there at the right time or you did something good. Like it's not like
Mm,
you did an incredible thing.
yeah,
It's you fulfilled the job, or you just happen to be there at the right moment, or you just did one specific thing that did not kill us. You know what I'm saying? So it's
my
not.
sister would
Go
say
ahead.
like we have one thing, like you do one thing sometimes, like my sister, like one of her she's agrees with me on most issues. One of her favorite presidents in terms of like some of the policies was Nixon, because Nixon set up the Environmental
Ooh,
Protection Agency.
ooh.
Like I know it's one specific thing he did, top of a pile of racism and anti-Semitism and corruption, but
That's
uh
true.
like yeah, yeah, like, but he created the EPA. So it's good that we have the EPA. Wish we didn't have to have Nixon for that to happen, but yeah, like it's presidents only have they can only do so much. Um, which yeah, they use that as an excuse though too. Sometimes when things aren't going where they're like, oh, I can only do so much, and then when they
Yeah.
make a decision that actually goes through and it doesn't work, they're like, oh, I can only do so much. It's like you just
Yeah.
did it and it didn't work. It's okay, whatever.
Yeah, it's another way of just saying I'm gonna fuck up sometimes. No, it's true. All right, so we're gonna move on. One more topic, inflation, and we'll be finished. I want to talk about that a little bit and about the future of America, and we'll wrap it up.
Mhm.
So I'll
Okay,
send you one more link, and we're done, brother.
cool. 1 second. Inflation is caused by many, many different things. It can be caused, most recently, it's caused by energy being more expensive. That's partially due to the war in Ukraine. That's a massive reason that we're having the inflation at the moment. Inflation is caused by there being too much demand for the supply. That's like the exact way that you put it. Um, and that itself can be caused by many, many different things. Um, what's strange is actually one of the things that causes inflation is really high employment rates. That's one of the things that causes inflation, strangely enough. Also, one of the reasons inflation is happening now is partially due to the fact that there is, if you don't remember, we had this pandemic that lasted about 2 years, and of course, a lot of people struggled with money at the time,
Mm,
because they were losing their opportunities to work. But then lots of people, as an example, like myself, where I work, my whole setup is right here. I work from home most of the time anyway. Were saving a lot of money at the time because, of course, you weren't allowed to travel, you weren't allowed to go out. So we were saving lots of that money, and then once things opened up again, there's higher demand because some people just have more savings and have more money. So those are just the small, like not 100% of the different things that can cause inflation, but more or less, it's just that there's a lot of demand, not a lot of supply, which jacks up prices. Another thing, though, which is super important, is that corporate profits in the United States have never been higher, or maybe not never been higher, but they're very, very high at the moment.
Yeah.
And this is partially because companies know that if there's inflation, part of inflation is that genuine the supply chain is a little bit disrupted or very disrupted in this case. But then they know that they can raise the price more because people are getting used to prices going up. So they're price gouging essentially. It's not, again, that's not the only reason that we have higher prices at the moment, but they're still making massive amounts of profit. So, well, then what's going on? Oh, it's because they're doing it intentionally to some extent. Um, and yeah, it's like a list of all of those things essentially.
Yeah, man. It's crazy to think that we're living in a time because inflation's always been around. For the
Yeah,
people
of
that
course.
don't
It's
think,
natural.
oh, like it's always been around. So the people that are surprised, oh, why are eggs so much money? No, we had to deal with it before. But why? What can we do to prevent it from happening? Because it's like a circle. Like it will leave us for a couple years, and it'll come back around and leave us again. What can we do to prevent this from happening? Because it does take a big toll each time it does come around because the cost of living is just right now it's incredibly high. A lot of people can't pay their bills. A lot of people are really suffering from this. So what can we do to prevent it from happening and how can we
Yeah.
go about it?
Give me one moment. I forget whether or not. So the first thing, the
Mm,
thing that happens now, like in the current system, is the Fed increases or decreases interest rates, which can lead to a smaller amount of money being in the system, which in turn lowers or keeps inflation to a minimum. However, they know when they're doing when they do this. I believe it's increase interest rates. I forget. I believe it's they increase in interest rates and then they keep more money out of the system. Is generally how they do it. Fewer dollars out there, or fewer zloty, or whatever currency out there. The it means it's slightly more valuable. So it tempers inflation. However, the big issue with doing this is we know that this causes unemployment. Again, one of the reasons inflation happens is that you have a lot of people with jobs. If you don't have very low unemployment, and obviously unemployment's bad, and inflation is also bad.
yes.
So it's like the way that we're combating it at the moment is to do the typical thing, like raising the interest rates in this way. But we know that lots of people are going to not have their jobs. And
Right.
it's normal people. This will be normal people. It's not going to be people making billions. It's not going to be the people who are price gouging and using inflation to their benefit. It's not those things. Meaning, sorry, those people aren't the ones that are going to get hurt. It's going to be normal people. It's going to be people who live paycheck to paycheck that are
Mm-hmm.
going to be hit by this and then
Right.
potentially unemployed by it. So they pay the most and they suffer. They meaning people who live paycheck to paycheck, which is a massive percentage of the United States, by the way. Um, they're hit hard by the inflation. Of course, naturally, things are more expensive. And of course, your wage doesn't go up with inflation most of the time, obviously. And then they could potentially lose their job due to something that the Fed did. So
Mm,
it always seems a big issue me and like lots of people who think like me have with how we deal with inflation is that it always seems to go on normal people. It's always like it always seems to affect normal people the most. And there are different ways, like modern monetary policy, like theory, believes you can just print money essentially. And yeah, this can cause inflation, but if you use taxes as a, which no one likes taxes. I hate taxes. The taxes here in Poland are quite high. No one
Yeah,
likes taxes, but
nobody. Yeah.
it's a tool that you can use, and you can pull money out of the economy in that way instead, and then use that money to fund programs that can help normal people who are dealing with inflation. So there, like, there are some issues with that. Not everyone agrees. I'm not an economist. Let me make that very clear. And anyone who knows a lot about the economy will know that from hearing me try to speak about it. But they're like using taxes to take money out of the economy, the private sector anyway, um, is something that can work, to at least mitigate inflation whilst also not screwing over uh, working people. This is like one of the many things that can be done. I wouldn't claim to know all of the different things modern monetary policy espouses. Essentially, the big difference between modern monetary policy and the mainstream monetary policy is that um, in the modern theory, a country isn't a household. People talk about the country as if it's a household. We don't have the money to do this. We can't do this. We can't go into debt. Oh, we're already in like lots of debt. So like we're already in lots of debt, and like you can't spend more than you make. That's how people talk about it. And it makes sense because that's how people operate in day-to-day life. But
Mm.
the truth is, it's a government. It's not a household. And you can, in fact, one of the ways you can, strangely enough, one of the ways you can also combat inflation is raise taxes and use some of it to pay off the debt that people complain about all the time. That's another way that you can curb
Yeah.
inflation.
Yeah, that's a good one too. Yeah, I agree with that one.
Yeah, but also the it's kind of unrelated. It's a bit unrelated to inflation, but people freak out about the debt, and of course, it's not good to have lots of debt, but we get things for the money that we spend, and and also like we've already discussed, we've already spent tons of money that no one complains about, and also like this isn't some doom that we're facing. Like they need us just like we need them. Meaning, like obviously, people always say China is like the biggest. They say that China is the biggest country that we're in debt to. It's not. It's actually Japan. Like, and China is like third on the list, I think, actually. But anyway, those are some things you can do about inflation. Um, just generally, by the way, inflation is actually much higher in Poland than it is in the United States.
Yeah, I was gonna
Uh,
ask you. I was gonna
yeah,
ask you. What have you seen a major difference from when you first arrived there to now? Like how is spending the food? How is everything going right now with inflation over there?
massive. It is. It was happening before slowly, but like as an example, like I use like the pint test. Like when you go out and get a pint with your friends. Um, when I first got here, it was in some places you could get them for 5 or 6 zloty, which is roughly like just over $1, like $1.25 or something, at a pub, by the way.
Really?
Like at a
Just
yeah.
wow,
Now,
that's
yeah,
cheap. That's cheap.
now super cheap, super cheap. And then, by the way, it's still pretty cheap now, like in comparison to the States, but we make zloty. Like I make money in zloty. So it doesn't matter how strong or not strong the dollar is when I live here, like still
Yeah.
and make money in zloty. But now, even in that place, particularly that I'm thinking about, I believe it's like 12 zloty now. It's a pretty big increase. And but obviously, it's not just that. It's like housing. We have a massive housing crisis here. That's not directly. It's not actually. It's not remotely uh, connected to inflation directly. It's affected because we had a refugee crisis here, specifically in Krakow. We had a like massive refugee crisis. I'm happy my Ukrainian brothers and sisters are here. Do not get me wrong. I am not the victim in that situation, but I had to most of my I have a decent place, but it's insanely expensive. It's just way too expensive. And like these are the real impacts. And like I can talk about we can do this, we can do this, we can do this, but I do also kind of understand the idea of like this is a disease, this is a symptom, and this needs to be fixed immediately. And the way that we've been doing it in the past is the with the like raising interest rates from the Fed. So they're like, oh, we don't need to debate all these other different things we can do. Let's just get it done as quickly as possible.
Mm,
But the negative effect is that lots of people will lose their jobs essentially.
right.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's kind of like a seesaw. Like it's kind of like a seesaw. Like if you take from one part of the spectrum, the other one's gonna fall, and it's like it kind of sucks because we're it's kind of like a trap, and it's like
Mhm.
okay, if we eliminate one, then we have to deal with the other. But inflation, man, it's not for the weak. If I want to say it like that, uh, it really does affect the poor class, the working class. It really does put a big toll on them. And it's unfortunate because we're never prepared for it. We're never prepared
Mhm.
for it. And even in 2008, when that whole thing happened with
The
fucking
Lehman Brothers
yeah, with
collapse,
the
yeah, with the
yeah, with the collapse and Wall Street and all that, we weren't really prepared for that. And I think now it's less of a problem than it was in 2008. But it's like, man, it's like it's unfortunate because it takes a toll, and I hope that when this is over, more people are prepared, meaning saving money and doing
Mhm.
other things to when it does come back around, because it will come back around again. That we're prepared for, and I just want people to have some type of financial establishment going into the next time, because a lot of Americans, what we did going into this time is we took that COVID relief check and we spent it.
Mhm.
And I don't think we should have, because we could have used it for this time, and we could have used it for the prices going up. And like a lot of us looked at it as spending money, shopping money. And like now I hope this can be
That's what it
a
was
lesson.
for. It's like
Yeah, it
it's
was for,
partially what it
yes.
was for, to
Yes,
stimulate
it
the
was.
economy
Yes,
as well as
yes,
like provide. That is true. I
yes.
mean, like that's not particularly uh it's funny, sorry, there's this comedian really like. His name's like Cody Johnston. Like I really like Cody Johnston. He's
Mm,
absolutely fantastic. He does a really silly inflation episode where he's pretending to be this 1950s guy explaining the economy to him, and it's him, like it's him playing the same two people. It's great. But he said, "Oh, so we shouldn't be spending money because that'll increase inflation. Oh, so then we should be saving money." And then the character he plays like, no, you have to spend money because that's what keeps the economy going. So like the principles of it, like you're saying, like a seesaw. It's like,
it's
no,
a
you can't.
seesaw.
They don't want you saving too much money because that can lead to like different issues because it's not the economy isn't quote unquote like flowing as much. It's not as much money flowing through the economy. But then if it's too much, then it's inflation and that causes yeah, it's almost like we invented money. Like it's almost like it's a concept that we created. And
Yeah, yeah.
we didn't
It's
invent value, but we did invent money. Like that's what I would
yeah,
say.
yeah. It's fucked up. So let me ask you this before we end the show. What is the future for America, and where do you see it going? And can you give me your opinions on what people should prepare for and like how we can finally get on that American dream that everybody's talking about, whatever. But what is the path that we should take, and what is the future you think is for the United States? Just an
I
opinion.
think the biggest thing, the path, obviously, like with everything we've said, it looks bleak. It does, obviously, it looks very bleak for many different reasons. The thing that I would genuinely be scared about in terms of politics is um, election subversion, affronts to democracy, denying elections. That's a massive problem. We have a lot of people in this country who believe that the 2020 election was stolen. It just wasn't. Like it just wasn't, and that's a serious issue. And if that gets to a boiling point, just in terms of politics, which isn't everyday life, obviously, it affects everyday life, but it's not everyday life. Um, that can, I would essentially, what quote unquote, watch out for that. Tell people, and if I could give any advice, it would be to vote. I don't know. I know that sounds really obvious and really like, but I know I did. I put my nose up and voted for Biden. And I think like things like this, if I look at it in a positive way, if I try to see things in a positive sense, I would say we have to do things slowly. It's just unfortunately, it's not how I would want to do them primarily, like ideally, but these things like as an example, Medicare for all. We're not going to have Medicare for all anytime soon, but things might be slightly better sometime soon, and that's like it's not a sexy way of describing a political policy. It's not a sexy way of like having a political campaign. Can you imagine if like Biden was just like things will be slightly better? It's not a great way of
No, it's not.
selling.
No,
It's
no,
not a
no.
great way of selling things to people. Um, the hope that I would have is if we were able to get money out of politics, if we were able to get rid of lobbying specifically, I think a lot of these things could change. There are lots of people every day who are not politicians, who are not voting, who are trying to make this country better. There are people in neighborhoods with large amounts of gun violence, just having get-togethers and trying to connect more with the community, trying to limit the violence in their own communities that are making a difference. There are organizations that help veterans that are making a difference. There's all this shit. There's is all of this shit, but there is in the United States where there's also tons and tons of compassionate people that really care, that are already doing things that are positive. It's bleak when you look at the political system, and it is, but all we can do is we can't submit to apathy. It's really hard. You might be like, okay, well, you moved to Poland. Well, yes, but yes, but I do still care, and I do
Yeah.
vote, and I still put money that I can into things like, for as an example, for the victims' funerals of the shooting that happened in Nashville. I highly recommend there are some GoFundmes that people can go to. Um, just trying, it sounds so cliche, just try to be good to each other. And I don't mean necessarily with politics, I don't have that view, but in terms of just trying to be there for each other. I know it sounds all like kumbaya and shit, but sometimes those little things that seem kind of um unimportant, like not important, can be. So yeah, that's all. I wish I had all the answers, but I clearly don't.
Nah, man, I
Yeah.
appreciate that, man. And I think what is necessary too is us as a people to agree and disagree with each other,
Yeah,
because a
yeah,
lot of people, when you explain your opinion about anything, they either get upset
yeah. Mhm,
or they ignore. I think it's important, if me and you don't see eye to eye, it's important for us
mhm,
to respect each other. And I think a lot of people need to take that into account. Even though this person, maybe this person thinks differently than you, no matter what. This is a person, it's a human. They have feelings. You need to respect
Mhm.
who they are. You don't have
Yeah.
to expect their morals, but respect who they are. So I think disagreeing, agree to disagree, I think is important for us to move forward. And I think if we do that, we'll be in a better place than we are now. I think
Yeah.
so. I think agree and disagree is the most important thing we should do, moving forward. That's my opinion.
Fair enough, man. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man. Yeah. So, I want to thank you for coming on. I know it's been a while, because we've been trying to correlate times, but I appreciate you taking time, bro. This was good, man. I would like to have you back on,
Yeah, it's
for
been
future
fun, man. I really
conversation.
enjoyed it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I would like to have you on for future conversations, and let's keep in touch, brother. And I hope you have a great week going into next week. And I hope you have a great time today with your stand up, bro. Enjoy. And this has been Just a Thought podcast, man. We are
Yeah.
out. Yes.
Do widzenia. Bardzo dobrze ci wiedzieć. Goodbye. Very nice to see you, man.
Yeah, man. Take care, brother.